The following stories contain themes and descriptions that may be disturbing to some listeners. Topics may include supernatural encounters, psychological distress, and real-life horror scenarios in workplace and everyday settings. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Story 1. Last house on the right. In all my time as a realtor, I've learned that every agent has that house, the one that lingers in your memory, makes your skin crawl, and leaves you wondering what exactly you walked into. For me, this wasn't just that house. It was the house. It wasn't particularly old, built in the late 1970s. A split-level ranch with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms on a decent-sized lot, backing up to a small wooded area. From the outside, it looked like any other suburban home. The only thing unusual was the price, about 30% below market value for similar homes in the neighborhood. I first took the listing in March 2016. The owner was a bank. It had been foreclosed and sitting empty for almost a year. The bank manager seemed oddly eager to get rid of it, even at the low price. But I was excited at the opportunity. Banks hate having properties on their books. The first strange experience happened during the initial walkthrough. I brought my assistant Jen to help with measurements and photos. The house was completely empty, furniture removed, nothing left but bare rooms. Jen went upstairs while I started in the basement. It was partially finished with old 70s wood paneling, drop ceilings and worn carpet. Pretty standard, but it was cold, much colder than it should have been. March is chilly here, but the heat was on in the house. I remember thinking the furnace probably needed checking. While I was measuring one of the basement rooms, I heard footsteps directly above me. Assuming it was Jen, I didn't think much of it, until I realized the steps were heavy, like boots on hardwood. Jen weighs maybe 110 pounds. These were deliberate, slow footsteps that crossed the living room above, paused, and then returned. "Jen?" I called. No response. I went upstairs to find her sitting on the floor of the master bedroom, sorting through paperwork. "Is there someone else here?" I asked. She looked at me confused. "No, just us. Why?" "I heard footsteps, heavy ones right above me." She raised an eyebrow. "I've been in here for the last 10 minutes. Haven't moved." We laughed it off. Old houses settle, right? Pipes knock. There are logical explanations for this kind of thing. Later that day, while making notes in the kitchen, I felt a sudden sharp pinch on my calf, like someone had grabbed a bit of skin and twisted, hard. I yelped and spun around. No one there. I was alone. Then we heard it. A high-pitched scream from somewhere in the house. A woman's scream, pained and terrified. Jen and I collided in the hallway, both of us running for the front door. Outside on the lawn, pale and shaken, she asked, "What the heck was that?" "Maybe a cat got inside," I offered weakly, but we both knew it wasn't a cat. We went back in, carefully, checked every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing, no signs of a break-in, no open windows. The back door was locked from the inside. I told myself the scream came from outside, maybe someone in the woods behind the property, but I didn't believe it. The first open house was a disaster. Despite heavy advertising, only 4 groups showed up. 3 left within minutes, each giving a different excuse. The 4th, a young couple with a toddler, stayed longer. We were in the kitchen talking when their little boy, who'd been playing in the living room, came running in, crying hysterically. "What's wrong, buddy?" his father asked, kneeling down. Through sobs, the boy said, "A little red man tried to take my car." The parents laughed nervously and apologized for his imagination, but he wouldn't stop crying. Eventually they left, promising to call later. They never did. Over the next few weeks, I showed the house to a dozen more potential buyers. 3 different people, who had never spoken to each other, asked me if the house had a history of satanic activity or witchcraft. When I asked why, they all described the same thing, seeing a small red figure with horns darting between rooms or peering around corners, always out of the corner of their eyes. I tried to brush it off. Maybe someone started a rumor, and it snowballed. Then I saw it. I was doing a final walkthrough after a showing, making sure the lights were off and doors were locked. In the reflection of the living room window, I saw something move behind me, about 3 feet tall, vaguely humanoid, definitely not human. It had reddish skin and what looked like small horns or pointed ears. When I turned around, nothing was there, but I knew what I'd seen: red skin, hooved feet and horns. That night, I finally started digging into the house's history. The bank hadn't disclosed anything unusual, but clearly something was off. What I found was a confusing mess of local legends. According to county records, the house had changed owners 8 times in 40 years, unusually high. An elderly neighbor told me a little girl had been murdered there in the early 80s by her uncle, but I found no news articles confirming it. A mailman claimed a woman had jumped out of a second-floor window after discovering her husband with her sister, but the windows were too small for that to be possible. A teenage boy said his dad grew up in the neighborhood and believed the house was built on a cursed spot, somewhere people used to perform ritual animal sacrifices before the neighborhood existed. Kids used to dare each other to spend the night in those woods. None of these stories appeared in official records, but they were all eerily consistent in one thing: this house wasn't right. The most recent owners had simply abandoned the place, leaving many possessions behind. In June, I arrived for a scheduled showing at 10 a.m. As I put the key in the front door, I heard that same blood-curdling scream from inside. My clients, a middle-aged couple, backed away instantly. "We'll pass," the husband said, already turning back to the car. I couldn't blame them. I almost left too, but it was my job. Inside, the house felt wrong, cold, off. That afternoon, while typing notes in the kitchen, I heard a tap, 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 hoof-like steps, approaching down the hallway. I froze. It stopped right at the kitchen entrance. Then came the same sharp pinch on my calf. I yelped. This time, instead of running, I was angry. "Stop it, that hurts," I said aloud. Then I heard it, a low, subtle chuckle, just a few feet away. I left immediately. After that, I made sure a second agent accompanied me on all showings. Strangely, the red man never showed when there were 2 of us, but strange things still happened. Sometimes the doors and windows wouldn't open, keys didn't work, windows wouldn't budge. But when we returned the next day, everything worked fine. One time, all 3 toilets flushed at the same time while we were in the living room. A client joked about it being on a timer. It wasn't. Electronic devices frequently malfunctioned. Phones would lose signal or die suddenly. Cameras took only blank or distorted images. One woman's Apple Watch freaked out and shut down entirely. Tech support later found no issues. By the 1-year mark, I was desperate. The bank was pressuring me to drop the price again. I'd shown the house over 50 times. 0 offers. The closest I came to a sale was a couple of scientists. He was a physicist. She was a biologist. They were logical, unshaken by the house's rumors. After 3 visits, they were ready to buy. But the day we sat at the kitchen table to sign preliminary paperwork, the temperature dropped dramatically. It was August, over 90 degrees outside, but our breath became visible. The wife grabbed her husband's arm and whispered, "Do you smell that?" I did. Sulfur, blood. Then the scratching began, inside the walls, slow, deliberate, moving around the room until it stopped, right behind me. They were staring over my shoulder, pale and speechless. We left immediately. They never returned my calls. By March 2018, 2 years after taking the listing, I was done. That month, I brought a contractor to estimate repairs the bank had finally agreed to. He was in the living room, measuring. I was in the kitchen. Suddenly, he ran in, pale and shaking, grabbed his tools and made for the door. "What happened?" I asked. "You knew," he accused me. "You knew what was in there." As he packed his truck, he muttered, "I've got 3 kids. I ain't messing with any of that." I calmed him down enough to get the story. He'd heard a child's giggle behind him, turned to see a small red devil, hooved feet, horns, standing in the doorway. It smiled and said in a child's voice, "This is my house." That afternoon, I called the bank and resigned from the listing. I suggested they auction it off or demolish it. The manager didn't argue, which told me they probably knew more than they let on. As far as I know, the house still sits empty. I avoid it. Drive a different route to work just to stay away. I check the property records now and then. From time to time, I check the property records, just out of morbid curiosity, and last I checked, it still hasn't sold. A few colleagues from my office have tried taking on the listing since I gave up. None of them have had any luck. One of them even left real estate altogether not long after. He wouldn't tell me why, but I could see something had shaken him to his core. I've moved on since then. Different listings, different neighborhoods, better luck. But that house still haunts me. Not just in my thoughts, but in my dreams. I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes. the hallway stretching longer than it should, shadows that move when nothing's there, and always, always that little red man watching me from the edge of a room I can never fully see. I don't know what resides in that house. I don't know if it's tied to any of the local legends, or if it's something older, darker, something that never should have been disturbed. What I do know is this: some houses aren't meant to be lived in, not by the living. Some houses are already occupied. And that little red man with the horns and hooves, he made it very, very clear. That house is his. Story 2. Back in 2003, I was 15 years old. I grew up in one of those neighborhoods where all the houses looked pretty much the same, but everyone had their own lawn situations going on. Some people were super anal about their grass, and others couldn't care less. It was the perfect place for a kid to make some cash with a lawnmower, which is exactly what I did from age 13 until this happened. Now, this was no professional operation, just me, my dad's old push mower, some hedge clippers, and a rake. But I had about 8 regular customers and made decent money for a kid with no car payment or rent. My business cards were literally index cards with my name and phone number that I would stick in people's mailboxes. Super professional, right? Anyway, one day in late June, my mom hands me the cordless phone, remember those, and says someone's asking about lawn service. The guy on the phone introduces himself and says he needs someone to clean up his father's property. He says his dad is 86 years old and can't maintain the place anymore, but he refuses to move out or hire regular help. The son, apparently, lived in another state and couldn't come deal with it himself. But during a recent visit, while checking the mail for his dad, he saw the index card. So, I'm thinking it's just another regular lawn job until he mentions he's willing to pay $200 for the whole thing. $200. That was serious money to a 15-year-old me back then. I could buy a new PlayStation game, heck, multiple new PlayStation games, maybe even have some money left over. But when he started to describe the job, I realized why he was offering so much. The place was on the edge of our subdivision, on a street I rarely went down, a quarter-acre lot completely overgrown with grass and weeds, like 3 feet tall in some spots. Plus, there was some cleanup needed too. The guy was pretty vague about that part, just said his dad had collected things over the years. He gave me the address, and I rode my bike over the same day to check it out. Holy crap, that place was a disaster, and that's me being modest. The house itself wasn't too bad from the outside, kind of small and plain, but the yard was like something from that Hoarder show. Old appliances, car parts, stacks of newspapers turned to mush from the rain, you name it, and it was there. And the grass was even taller than he described. I remember thinking then $200 was not enough, but at that point I'd already agreed, and my dad had always taught me to follow through with my promises. I knocked on the door to introduce myself to the old man, but I didn't get an answer. The son said that his dad might not come to the door, that he was a private guy, and I should just do the work without bothering him. Fine by me. Less awkward small talk. I started the next afternoon, brought all my equipment, plus some work gloves and trash bags. My plan was to clear out the junk first, then tackle the grass section by section. The sun was beating down that day, and the humidity was brutal. Within about 20 minutes, I was drenched in sweat and covered in dirt. I'd barely made a dent in one corner of the yard. It was around 5 o'clock p.m., maybe 2 hours into the job, when something happened. I was pulling some rusty metal thing, possibly some part of an old grill. I think I was pulling it out from under a bush when I heard what sounded like someone laughing quietly. A soft sound. I stood up and looked around but didn't see a soul. I went back to work. If it was anything at all, it was probably just the old man watching me from inside the house. But then I noticed something strange in the tall grass, about 15 feet away. The grass was moving, like something was crawling through it. There was no wind that day, so it wasn't the wind, just this path being made through the grass, and it was coming in my direction. I stood straight up. I thought it was a snake or maybe some animal, but whatever was moving out there was bigger than a snake, more like the size of a big dog, but real low to the ground, and that laughing sound was coming from it. Not going to lie to you, I was freaked out. I said, "Hello? Is someone there?" Which sounds stupid, yeah, but what else are you going to say? The movement stopped immediately. The laughing stopped too. I stood there holding a trash bag, feeling like an idiot, when suddenly something hit me in the back. I spun around real quick, and I saw a rusty soup can rolling on the ground. Someone had thrown a soup can at me. I looked back at where I'd seen the grass moving, but now there was nothing there. Then some other piece of junk, like a broken action figure or something, came flying at me from a completely different direction. That was enough for day one. I packed up my stuff and got out of there. I almost called the sun back to back out of this deal, but $200 is $200. And what did I say about my dad and promises? Day two, I brought my friend Hecky to help. Yeah, we called him Hecky. It was a play on his real name and his mum's name. It's a long story. I offered him $30 of the pay, but he said he'd do it for free if I would help him move some furniture at his house the next weekend. Hecky was a good dude like that. It was another hot day, but having someone to talk to made the work go by faster. We filled like 20 lawn bags with trash and junk, plus made a big pile of metal scrap that was too big for the bags. The old man never showed himself the whole time. Hecky kept joking that maybe he was dead in that house, which I didn't find particularly funny considering the neighborhood we were in had a pretty high average age, and the events of day one. We were clearing a very overgrown section along the back fence, and I found this odd little wooden figurine partially buried in the dirt. It was about 5 inches tall and carved to look like a person, but with a weirdly big head and no real facial features, just smooth wood where the face should be. I put it in my pocket, thinking it was kind of cool in a creepy way. A few minutes after that, I turned to show it to Hecky, and I nearly had a heart attack. Hecky was about 10 feet away from me, working on pulling up some kind of vine, totally focused on the task, and his hair, he had this long skater hair back then, was standing straight up in the air, like he was touching one of those static electricity balls at the Science Museum. And I'm not talking about a little bit of static. His hair was literally floating a good foot above his head, like someone was lifting it up, but there was nobody there. "Hecky!" I yelled, my voice cracking like I was 12 again. He looked at me, startled, completely unaware that anything was wrong. "What? Your hair, dude, your hair!" He reached up and felt his hair floating, and his eyes got so wide I could see white all around them. He screamed and jumped backward, and his hair instantly fell back down. We both stood there, breathing hard, staring at the empty space around where he'd been standing. "What the actual F was that?" Hecky finally said. I told him about the weird crawler in the grass and the laughing I'd heard the day before, plus the stuff being thrown at me. I didn't mention it earlier because it sounded so stupid, and I figured he wouldn't have shown up to help if I did. Well, Hecky wanted to leave after that, but I convinced him to stay by promising we'd stick together for the rest of the day and promising him $50 instead of $30. Money talks, even when dealing with possible ghost situations, and Hecky agreed. Nothing else weird happened that day, but we both kept looking over our shoulders every couple of seconds. We made good progress though, clearing almost half the yard by sunset. Day 3, I was on my own again because Hecky suddenly remembered he had to help his mum with something. Sure, but that's fine. I nearly bailed on the job altogether, but I'd already put so much work into it, and I really wanted that money. I decided to focus on mowing the sections we had already cleared of debris. I'd brought my dad's gas mower since the grass was too thick for the push mower. The noise of the engine made me feel better somehow, like it would drown out any creepy laughing or scare away any creepy things. The work was going fine until I started on a section near the back of the property. The mower kept dying on me for some reason. I'd restart it, go a few feet, and it would just die again. After the third try, I flipped it over to check if something was stuck underneath it. There was nothing caught in the blades, but what I did find were these deep scratches into the underside of the metal deck. They hadn't been there before. My dad would have noticed and freaked out on me. So someone or something had really done some damage while I was mowing. I know you're probably thinking it was something I ran over, but this thing had not made any noise today, just the typical grass mowing sounds. If I had hit an object that could tear it up like that, I would have heard it. I was officially spooked now, but still stubborn. I was too far into the job, though, and I wasn't going to walk away. I worked non-stop through the afternoon, not even taking a water break. I just wanted to be done already. Whatever was messing with me seemed to have backed off, maybe because there was less overgrowth to hide in now. By evening, I'd cleared and mowed about 80% of the yard. One more day, and that would be it. The final day was actually kind of boring compared to the others. I was tense the whole time, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. I cleared the last section of junk, mowed everything one final time, and even used the hedge clippers to clean up the bushes around the front of the house. The place looked completely transformed. You could actually see that it was a nice little property now. Once all the junk and overgrowth was gone, I was loading the last of my equipment into my dad's wheelbarrow around dusk when I felt like someone was watching me. It was that prickly feeling at the back of my neck. I'm sure we're all familiar with that because you hear it in all these stories. I'd felt it on and off the whole time though, but this was stronger. As I started to walk away from the property, I heard a quiet sound from behind me. Everything in my body said to keep on walking and not look back, but of course I looked back. Standing at the edge of the trees that lined the back of the property was a tall figure. It wasn't the old man. This person had to be about 6'5". It was definitely no elderly person. He was wearing what looked to be an old-fashioned suit, dark in color and kind of shiny in the fading light. His face was mostly hidden by the brim of his hat, but I could see his mouth, which was stretched wide into a smile. He lifted one hand and gave me this little wave, almost like how you'd beckon a child to come closer. His finger seemed a bit too long, but it was getting dark, so I couldn't be sure. I didn't wave back. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed the wheelbarrow and got out of there as fast as I could, without actually running. I felt that man's eyes on my back the whole way up the street. When I got home, there was an envelope in our mailbox with my name on it. Inside was $250 in cash and a note from the son thanking me for doing a thorough job. He'd apparently driven by earlier that day while I was working and was impressed enough to add a $50 bonus. I never saw or spoke to the son after that, nor his father. I have no idea if the old man even ever came outside to see the work that had been done, or heck, if he even existed. For a time, I began to wonder if the son I spoke to was in any way related to the tall man I saw at the end, but I felt silly for thinking that over time. I would ask people if they knew anything about that property. I never heard of any murders or mysterious disappearances, nothing that might explain a haunting. The old man, though, he apparently died in a nursing home a few years after, and the house was sold to a young couple who completely renovated it. I drive past the place sometimes when I go to visit my parents. It looks totally normal now, but I always wonder about that tall figure by the trees. What was he? Story 3. Babysitting was not something I wanted to do. It wasn't my thing at all. I wasn't a big fan of kids. I was 16 years old though, and my parents were very strict. They didn't want me to work at the local mall, and my options were limited. That's how I ended up watching little Emma for 3 nights a week while her parents had their date nights and business dinners. Those specific neighbors lived 2 doors down from us in our cul-de-sac. Nice house, newer than most in the neighborhood. The place was 2 stories with a nice finished basement and a backyard with one of those fancy play sets. They'd moved in when Emma was just a few months old. She was 2 years old when I began to watch her in 2011. Emma was an easy kid, thankfully. By 7:30 p.m. she would be bathed, storied and sound asleep. That left me with about 3 hours of homework time before her parents returned around 10:30 p.m. Pretty good arrangement. I'd been doing this for 3 weeks when stuff started to happen. Emma had gone down without a fuss as usual one night, and I was at the kitchen table with my algebra homework when I heard something through the baby monitor. As I listened closely, I swear it sounded like laughing. Not Emma's laugh, which was more like a high-pitched, bubbly, hiccuping sound. This was deep, like an adult's quiet chuckle. I stopped writing. The monitor hissed with static, and then went silent. I shook my head and thought this had to be some kind of interference with someone else's monitor or radio. It just had to be. But our neighborhood was mostly retirees, not a lot of babies around. Of course, I went upstairs to check on Emma. She was sleeping peacefully, one arm flung over her head, the other clutching her stuffed giraffe. The room was cold, which struck me as odd, since the rest of the house was comfortably warm. I adjusted her blanket and went back downstairs, uneasy but not exactly frightened. The following week, it happened again. This time, it sounded like whispering coming through the monitor. I couldn't make out the exact words. It was like a hushed conversation happening just out of earshot. I turned up the knob, and the whispering stopped immediately. Then there was a single shh that came through crystal clear before the monitor went silent. I checked on Emma again. Still asleep, undisturbed, but her room was freezing. I checked the vent in her room. It was barely flowing. I closed the door most of the way and went back to my homework, keeping one eye on the monitor the whole time. I didn't tell her parents just yet. It didn't seem too major yet. It was too easily explained by interference like the first time. The third incident was the one that really got to me. I was in the living room going through my Spanish flashcards when I began to hear footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps, like a man wearing boots. I spun around, expecting to see the baby's father home early, but there was nobody in the room with me. The footsteps continued, though, crossing the room toward the staircase. I could hear the distinctive sound of weight making the floorboards creak. I could see the carpet compressing slightly with each invisible step. I was paralyzed, then dropped my flashcards as the footsteps slowly ascended the stairs. I should have ran up, grabbed Emma, and gotten out of that house. That would have been the smart thing, but it was like my body wouldn't respond to my brain's commands. I just sat there instead, listening as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs and moved down the hallway toward Emma's room. The baby monitor erupted with static, then went dead. I finally managed to move, lunging for the stairs. I took those steps 2 at a time, terrified of what I was going to find in her room. But Emma's room was exactly as I'd left it. She hadn't so much as stirred. The cold, though, was intense now. I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. I backed out of the room, pulling the door nearly closed, and I ran back downstairs. I called my mum, making up some story about hearing a weird noise outside. She told me to lock the doors and windows, which I had already done. Her voice did calm me down, though. I stayed on the phone with her until my hands stopped shaking. The week after that, I nearly called the neighbors to cancel, but at that point, I was enjoying the money and needed more of it, and a part of me felt responsible for Emma. If something strange was happening in their house, someone who was aware of it needed to be there. That night was the worst. Emma went to sleep as usual. No sounds came through the monitor, which was almost more unsettling than the whispers had been. I was exhausted from a history test earlier that day, so I curled up on the couch with my textbook, planning to just rest my eyes for a minute. At some point, I woke up to the sensation of weight settling next to me on the couch. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet when I felt something cold and heavy rest against my shoulder. Ahead, I could feel hair brushing against my neck. Worst of all, I could hear and feel breathing, slow breaths that didn't fog in the now freezing air of the living room. I was way past terrified by then. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, hoping that this would end soon, too scared to open them because I didn't know what I would see. The weight on my shoulders shifted slightly, the cold air seeping through my sweater and into my skin. The breathing changed rhythm, speeding up. Something cold touched my hand where it lay on the couch, and then I finally reacted. I jumped up, a scream caught in my throat, and I spun around. A face had been beside me, but there was no one there, save for the indentation on the couch where something had been sitting moments earlier. The baby monitor on the coffee table crackled. The life through the static came a sound I still hear in my nightmares. This low, building growl that grew into a roar so loud, it felt like it was shaking the walls of the house. The lights flickered. Pictures rattled on the walls, and upstairs, Emma screamed. I ran to her, no longer caring what I might encounter. I found her standing up in her crib, wailing at the top of her lungs, reaching her arms out to me. I scooped her up and ran downstairs. I grabbed my phone to call her parents. They came home right away. I told them Emma had woken up screaming from a nightmare and wouldn't settle down. And I didn't mention anything else. I didn't know what the point would be. That was my last night babysitting for them. I made up an excuse about my school workload getting too heavy. They were disappointed, but they understood. Emma cried when I left, clinging to my leg, and that broke my heart. But I couldn't go back to that house. The strange thing is, as far as I know, after that night with the roar, nothing else happened. My mum still plays bridge with Emma's mother, and apparently, the family has never experienced anything unusual. They even had another baby last year. Sometimes I wonder if whatever was there was only active when I was watching Emma, or maybe it's just gone now. Maybe her scream scared it off. Story 4. Most of my friends and family don't understand why I spend my weekends in the middle of nowhere filming abandoned buildings and empty forests. My YouTube channel only has 340 subscribers at this point, but I've always been drawn to places with history. The more forgotten, the better. One fall I was shooting in the Black Mountains of western North Carolina. The fall colors were peaking, perfect for B-roll footage. I'd found this promising fire lookout tower from the 1930s about 2 miles up an unmarked trail. The hike was brutal but worth it. I got some killer sunset shots from the top. It was around sundown when disaster struck. I'd set my main camera, a Canon I'd saved for months to buy, on a rock outcropping to capture a time-lapse of the shadows moving across the valley. A sudden gust of wind knocked it over, sending it tumbling down the steep slope below. I watched in horror as my $2,000 investment bounced and slid out of sight. Anyone who does what I do knows equipment like that is practically an extension of your body. I was not about to leave my camera behind. Even with daylight fading, I carefully picked my way down the slope, using my phone's flashlight to guide me. The cliff was about 40 feet high, with enough trees and rocks to make it navigable if you're careful. I found the camera wedged between two rocks near what looked like a narrow opening in the cliff face. The lens was cracked, but the memory card would probably be fine. As I reached for it, I noticed some cold air flowing from the opening. It was a cave entrance, partially hidden by hanging vines and brush. I'm no cave explorer by any stretch, but the documentarian in me was instantly curious. I shined my light inside. There was a passage large enough to stand in that extended beyond the reach of my beam, perfect for some creepy footage. I grabbed my camera, crack and all, and took a few steps into the entrance, filming the way the moisture glistened on the stone walls. Then I heard a whisper, closer. The words seemed to come from the darkness ahead of me, more felt than heard, like it had bypassed my ears and gone straight to my brain. I thought it was another hiker inside who might have been injured, so I called out to be sure. There was no response except for a subtle change in the air pressure that made my ears pop. I tried again. Hello? Anyone in there? I heard it clearly this time. Come see. It was deep and rasping, like someone who had been smoking for decades, but there was something distinctly wrong about it. There was a layered quality to it, like there was another voice behind it, speaking in unison. I'd like to say I'm brave, but I'm not stupid. I quickly backed out of that cave, nearly tripping over exposed roots. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the camera again. I told myself it had to be the way the wind was going through the cave system, making word-like sounds. If it was another person, I hadn't seen anyone else around all day, so that had to be it. Just some wind. The hike back to my car took twice as long as it should have, probably because of the mark the whole time. I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Several times I spun around, sure that I'd hear footsteps behind me, but the trail was empty. At one point, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, something dark sliding between trees. But when I turned, nothing was there. My car was parked at an overlook about a half-mile from the main road, one of those gravel areas where people stop to take photos. I often sleep in my car when shooting in remote locations. It's got tinted windows, and I built a platform in the back that fits a twin mattress perfectly, cheaper than motels and puts me right where I need to be for dawn shots. That night, despite being exhausted, I couldn't sleep. Every sound from the surrounding forest seemed to be louder than it should be. I think I was just paranoid. The cave incident had me spooked all day. By 2:00 a.m., I was starting to fall asleep when I heard the tapping. A tap, 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 right on my driver's side window. I froze. Through the tinted glass, I could see nothing but the darkness outside. It came again. Tap, tap, tap. I reached for my phone, using its light to scan the windows. Nothing was visible, but the tapping went on, moving from window to window around the car. I'd locked the doors. I always do. But suddenly, that didn't feel like enough. Whatever was out there seemed to be circling my car. It was like it was testing each window. The tapping then stopped. The silence that followed was scary enough. After about 5 minutes of nothing, I tried to tell myself it was a bird, something that got onto my car and just pecked at the windows. I climbed from the back into the driver's seat, figuring I'd start the car and turn on the headlights to reassure myself. Key in the ignition, hand shaking, something happened down the hall. A whisper came from directly beside my right ear, inside the car with me, so close I could feel cold breath on my neck, a voice impossible to mistake for anything human. I peeled out of that overlook, spraying gravel in my rearview mirror. Just for a second, as the headlights swept across the trees, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, tall and thin. I drove 3 hours straight without stopping, and when I did stop, it was only at a 24-hour gas station, a place with plenty of lights. All my footage from that day was corrupted, probably from the drop, so the memory card, after all, didn't make it. I was lucky that the replacement lens and card were only about $200. I kept doing my hobby, but I've never experienced anything that creepy. Story 5. For 8 years, I was with rural EMS. I ended up quitting, People assumed it was burnout, but it wasn't. I've seen a lot. Car wrecks, overdoses, elderly folks who died alone and weren't found for weeks. None of that drove me out. And to be honest, this experience didn't exactly do it either, but I guess in a way, everything combined added up, and this story didn't help either. It was early 2019, around 2 a.m. Dispatch sent me to an address for an elderly female, possibly having a stroke. We get calls like that all the time. Working nights in a rural county means lots of old folks living alone. I was flying solo that shift. There were budget cuts, and it meant we often ran with single medics in the overnight hours. Unless I'm mixing up some memories here, I think it was raining that night. I recall having to squint to see the street signs. It was easy to find the street, but there was no house at the number I was given. The street ended before that. I circled twice and called dispatch to confirm. They verified the address and said the caller was still on the line. Okay, strange, but not unprecedented. Sometimes new developments mess up the maps. Sometimes drunk people don't know their own addresses. I pulled over and told dispatch to ask the caller to flash their porch lights. Nothing happened on the street. Then dispatch came back, sounding confused. The caller said they were flashing them. Can you see anything? I couldn't. Just empty lots between houses. I walked the street in the rain with my flashlight. Where the house should have been was just an overgrown empty lot with a weathered for sale sign. Eventually, dispatch lost the caller, and we chalked it up to a prank or confusion. These things do happen, and I only hope the person in trouble got the help they needed. A couple of weeks later, there was a similar call in the middle of the night. Pediatric patient with difficulty breathing. The address existed this time, but when I got there, it was an abandoned house with plywood over the windows and a collapsed porch. No car in the driveway, no lights, clearly uninhabited for years. I called it in as a possible false alarm. The dispatch insisted the caller had been a frantic mother. I did a perimeter check anyway. We take calls about kids seriously, but nothing, no signs of life. As I was leaving, my portable radio crackled with what sounded like a child's coughing, then went silent. When I checked the transmission logs later, nothing was recorded during that time. April brought another one, a different address. Elderly male, possibly having a cardiac issue. The place was a burned-out shell of a house. County records later showed it had caught fire years earlier, killing the elderly resident. By June, I'd responded to 6 calls like this, always to abandoned properties, condemned houses, empty lots, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always when I was working alone. In some free time, I decided to dig into these addresses. Each location definitely had a history of death. The first empty lot. A house had been demolished there after a murder-suicide in the 90s. The abandoned house with the supposed pediatric emergency. A child had drowned there years before. Every single address had a similar story. My supervisor thought it was a coincidence. He even had me take a week off and suggested I get counseling. I didn't argue. The call that really broke me came in July at 2:23 a.m. Dispatch sent me to an address for a woman in labor. The place existed, an old farmhouse set back from the road about half a mile. As I pulled up, I could see the house was abandoned. Broken windows, missing roof shingles, overgrown yard. But unlike the others, I heard something from inside, a woman's voice calling for help. Protocol says wait for law enforcement on potentially dangerous scenes, but those cries sounded genuine and desperate. If there was actually a woman in labor, minutes mattered. I grabbed my jump bag and approached the front door. It was ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. "EMS!" I called out. "Anyone home?" The crying continued from upstairs. I followed the sound, my flashlight bouncing off peeling wallpaper and broken floorboards. The bedroom was empty except for a rusted metal bed frame, but the crying was loud here, seeming to come from all around me. I'd noticed the walls were covered in scratches. "Hello, I'm a paramedic. Where are you?" The crying stopped abruptly, then in a voice that didn't sound entirely human, "James." Nobody had used my first name on the radio. Dispatch always used last names or unit numbers. I backed toward the door. "I'm leaving now. If you need medical assistance, you'll need to show yourself." I ran all the way back to my ambulance. I called in sick for my next 3 shifts. When I came back, there was one more call, to the address where I grew up as a child. The house my parents lost to foreclosure when I was 10. That house had been torn down for a highway expansion years ago. I didn't take the call. I had to explain the situation to my supervisor, but this time at least he understood. About 2 years after this series of events, I quit. Again, it wasn't directly the cause, but it didn't help. I've always wondered what it was that was sending me out to these addresses, and why some people might think it's ghosts, echoes of the past. But that night when I heard it say my name, it didn't sound like a ghost. It sounded sinister. Story 6. The trees of the forest holler an eerie whistle as the sharp, brisk wind cuts through everything in its path. A crow lands on a nearby branch, overlooking the small clearing carved out by fate. It caws at the 15-year-old boy standing in the center, holding a kendama. The handle drips a strange black liquid. The ball is embedded deep in the eye cavity of some poor soul as the string dangles down its face, its skin black like burned meat in places where there was still flesh. In other places, bare bones coated with black ash and dirt. The 15-year-old boy pants heavily as he stands over the body that was once full of inhuman life. Its hair the wispy blonde as it always has been, but the rest of it is wrong. Hiro could see through its lies, and he put an end to it once and for all. He is out of breath, but he did it. He destroyed it. He looks down at the body. He didn't destroy him, he destroyed it. Right? Come on, Hiro, let it go, it's just a dumb toy. A young boy about 10 years old with baby blue eyes, wispy blonde hair, and wearing a plain white shirt with blue jean shorts, tugs at an older boy's sleeve. The young boy's voice trembles in both fear and desperation. It's the look in the older boy's eyes that scares him. The older boy, Hiro, stands as tall as a 10th grade teenager can, his body in the middle of deciding if it wants to be long and lanky or short and stocky. His arms and legs want to be tall, but his torso is stuck in his chubby kid years. Hiro's head, however, had the face of man already. It's because of his eyes. That's what other adults would tell Hiro. His eyes hate the world it gazes upon. Anyone's eyes would look like Hiro's eyes if they saw what he did. A mushroom-shaped cloud that brings death and fire to an entire city. But Hiro's mum made sure that she brought him to a place where they could start a new life, a better life. A survivor, that's what Hiro calls himself. His mum isn't a survivor because she doesn't hate like he does. She is a refugee. She even married a man with the same white skin that decimated his city. He even gave her the life she always dreamed of in exchange for accepting his son into her family. His name was Jimmy, and he was 5 years younger than Hiro. Hiro was told to always watch over Jimmy, and so he did for the next 5 years. But Hiro never let himself love this false younger brother. The only thing he loved is the kendama his dad gave him before he left Japan. And now Jimmy has lost his kendama. Apparently Jimmy was playing with it near the forest, and when he left it unattended, a crow came and snatched it up, probably mistaking the toy for a common tree branch. Hiro could hear Jimmy's pleas from inside the house. He came out to see what the problem was, and immediately knew what was lost. Hiro and Jimmy stand near the edge of the forest. Jimmy still tugs at Hiro's sleeve, begging him not to chase after the crow, but Hiro continues to stare out into the black shadows of the forest. The crow, as if beckoning Hiro, caws 3 times. I'm going after it. You can stay here and continue to cry like a baby, or you can help fix your mess. What's it gonna be, Jimmy? Hiro's words are coarse and harsh, especially the way he says Jimmy. A seething disdain is unmistakable. But Dad said, Jimmy begins. He is not my dad, he is your dad, Hiro spits. Jimmy lowers his head in shame. It's not the first time he has made this mistake. Sorry, my dad said, don't let your brother out of sight today and stay out of the forest. Kids have been going missing. Jimmy finishes and can tell he has made another mistake. The worst mistake he can make while talking to Hiro. You are not my brother, so what your dad said doesn't apply to me. Can't look after a brother I don't have. Hiro pulls his arm away from Jimmy's weak grip. Jimmy's eyes begin to shimmer with tears. Hiro looks back at Jimmy. He has grown on him over the past couple years when his whining lessened, and he became more of a person and less an annoying kid. They have even shared a laugh or two playing with Hiro's kendama as Hiro told Jimmy stories about growing up in Japan. But that doesn't change the fact that this stupid kid lost the one thing he loved, and he can't let that go. He will get his kendama back, even if he has to leave Jimmy alone. Jimmy is 10 now. He has to be able to look out for himself. Hero had no choice, so maybe now is Jimmy's moment to become a man. Hero turns back towards the forest and says, "There comes a time when you just have to man up and face your fears, Jimmy. It's just a forest, nothing but trees and animals. I'm not afraid, so I'm going." But Hero is afraid, and yet he runs into the forest and hears Jimmy's small but quick footsteps attempting to catch up to him. Jimmy calls out, "Wait, Hero, I'm coming too, wait!" But Hero doesn't wait for Jimmy as the trees of the forest slowly engulf him in darkness. Hero runs and runs through the dark, twisted trees. Following the taunting calls of the crow, Hero finds himself in a small clearing. The clearing is perfectly circular, with a small boulder in the center covered gross brown moss. The trees grow in an odd way, so that their canopy still covers the sky except for one tiny hole that shines a grey light down on the boulder. On the boulder, Hero sees the crow, its talons clutching his kendama. The crow caws at Hero and stares into his eyes. Hero stares back. He swears that this crow's eyes have the same eyes as him, hateful eyes. But what did he do to this crow to make it hate him? The crow is as still as a shadow, and so is Hero. He doesn't want to scare it and take off with his kendama. Finally, Hero takes the first bold step towards the crow. It tilts its head in curiosity and snaps its beak. That's it, nice and easy. Good bird. Give me my kendama back. Hero takes one step at a time. With each step, the light shining from above gets a little smaller and smaller until the grey glimmer of light is completely snuffed out just as Hero reaches out for his kendama. Hero's night vision struggles to adjust. He rapidly blinks as the blackness of the forest assaults his eyes. The darkness is so dense he can't tell the difference between his eyes being open or closed. Then a chilling voice freezes Hero in place. "Choose Hero." A gravelly, high-pitched voice scraps against Hero's eardrums like fingernails on a chalkboard. Hero wants to run, but the second he heard this voice, his limbs stiffened up. He tries to will his legs to move, but a mixture of fear and desperation has gripped them tightly in an agonizing knot. Hero can feel the familiar wooden handle at the edge of his fingertips. Just a couple more centimeters, and he can grab it, then hopefully run away from whatever is here with him in the darkness. "You can't run from me. Dad said so." Each word that leaves this thing's mouth is labored, like their voice is being controlled by something else. But that voice is a lot clearer, and Hero can recognize it. It's Jimmy's voice. The heavy darkness weighs on Hero's voice as he barely manages to squeak out, "Jimmy, why don't you want to play with me?" The cadence of Jimmy's voice is growing faster. Whatever is controlling Jimmy is getting stronger. "Jimmy, whatever you are, let him go." Hero finds his courage again as he shouts back at the oppressive darkness. "Why don't you love me?" Jimmy's real voice became recognizable for a moment. Hero knows that he is still trying to fight his enslaver. "That's it, Jimmy. Fight it. Whatever this thing is, it isn't as strong as us if we fight it together." Hero's strength returns to him as he can feel the knots in his legs untwist. He can move again. He immediately takes a step towards his kendama and grasps the handle. The instant Hero is holding his kendama, he hears an ear-piercing shriek that fills him with horror and dread.
Hero covers his ears. He can feel the beating of his eardrums until they nearly burst. Hot, wet blood oozes down Hero's ears.
"You don't love me. You don't love our family." Hero can barely tell the puppet master's voice from Jimmy's now. Is this Jimmy talking to him? The real Jimmy? "No, Jimmy! Don't let it win! Fight back!" Hero's voice wails in the darkness as he desperately tries to reach his brother. "You don't love me. You can't even say it." The gravelly voice and Jimmy's voice are indistinguishable now, perfectly in sync with each other, no one voice stronger than the other, their goal now shared. "I don't love anything," Hero wails at the darkness, his hands clenched in tight fists. He can feel his own blood trickle down his palms. Are his eyes wide open or shut? Not even Hero can tell. "You love that stupid toy more than me." Jimmy's voice again. The other voice is weaker. A glimmer of light shines from above, the dark canopy parting for this single moment. In that instant, Hero can see what's in front of him. Like a grotesque flash from a Polaroid camera, Hero sees his kendama on the ground, but he also sees something that makes him gag on the spot. Standing barely 5 feet away, a creature about Jimmy's height. A living nightmare. Not an innocent boy, but a horrific, twisted, dark imitation of one. Its flesh, where it still has flesh, scorched by fire and radiation. Its mouth agape with unhinged jaw, the bone exposed on the left side. Its eyes hollow holes where the eyeballs were disintegrated by heat and agony, and its hair the same wispy blonde. Whatever this thing is, it can't be him. It can't be Jimmy. And now that Hero believes this, there is nothing stopping him from doing what he needs to do to be free from this dark creature. Another flash of light. Hero can get to the kendama in one quick movement and then use it to kill this monstrous imposter. On the next flash, he will go for it. He just needs to survive a few more seconds. Hero! 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 Doesn't love anything. Doesn't love anything. Lies! 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 All lies! Jimmy's voice and the imposter's voice maliciously mock Hero. Hero loves home, his stupid, dumb, ruined home, lost to fire and ash, and a big boom, and now he still doesn't love us. Doesn't love us. Doesn't love anything. Hero can hear its feet stomp on the ground like a child throwing a tantrum. This thing may sound like Jimmy, but it's not Jimmy. Jimmy would never mock Hero for his past. Jimmy is the one person who treated Hero with admiration, not pity, not false cheer, not unfiltered discontent, not hate, admiration from a younger brother. This thing, this dark imposter, isn't his younger brother. It's mocking fueling the rage that has been boiling deep down in Hero all these years later. A rage that can only be quelled by one thing once ignited: violence. Finally, a flash of light lingers for a couple extra seconds. Hero leaps into action. His rage blinds him to everything else. Heart pumping pure adrenaline into his tight, taut, burning muscles, making him stronger than he ever has been. Strong enough to use a simple kendama toy as a weapon. His love for it transformed by his touch, motivated by rage. It no longer brings him the same nostalgic comfort. It only makes him angry. Angry that this is all he has left. His home gone and the world celebrated. How could they celebrate such abhorrent violence? This place, its people, this thing. They all have one thing in common. They hate Hero and Hero hates them. With the kendama transformed into a hammer in Hero's mind, he lunges at the dark imposter. His strong, young, healthy body collides with its small, brittle, death-defied body. It shrieks again. He raises the kendama above its head, and its wispy blonde hair sprawls on the ground. Hero hesitates as the dark imposter uses a perfect imitation of Jimmy's voice. Ha! Hero can't do it, can't destroy the one thing he used to love, can't love anymore. Its mocking tone degenerates into a low demonic cackle. Shut up, shut up, shut up! Heroes brings the kendama down on this thing's face, the ball still attached to the handle. 1, 2, 3. 4 times the kendama smashes into this thing's face. Hero can feel its acidic, sticky, lukewarm blood coat his hand, face, and kendama. You are not my brother! Hero screams defiantly as he brings the kendama down one last time with all his might. Squelch! Hero can feel the ball sink deep into the dark imposter's eye socket as the body shivers for a moment, then lays motionless. He stands back up and pulls at the kendama now stuck in this thing's head. He tugs at it until the handle snaps off, leaving the ball behind. The trees of the forest holler an eerie whistle as the sharp, brisk wind cuts through everything in its path. A crow lands on a nearby branch overlooking the small clearing carved out by fate. It caws at Hero, standing in the center holding a kendama. The handle drips a strange black liquid. The ball is embedded deep in the eye cavity of it as the string dangles down its face. Its skin black like burned meat in places where there was still flesh. In other places, bare bones coated with black ash and dirt. Hero pants heavily as he stands over the body that was once full of inhuman life. Its hair the wispy blonde as it always has been, but the rest of it is wrong. Hero could see through its lies, and he put an end to it once and for all. He is out of breath, but he did it. He destroyed it. He looks down at the body. He didn't destroy him, he destroyed it. Right? Hero! Hero! Where are you? It's dark and scary in here. Are you okay? I heard you screaming. Jimmy's innocent voice caresses Hero's ears like sweet music, despite his voice shaking with fear. Hero drops the handle of the kendama, ruined by rage and violence. He runs towards Jimmy's voice. "I'm right here, Jimmy, and I'm okay. Your big brother is okay." A light flashes in the distance. Hero takes off towards it with a rekindled heart, leaving the shattered kendama in the darkness where it belongs. Story 7. From the start, Jeremy Allen's life was plagued by struggles. After a brutally tough childhood, his life led to hard work and loss. In his dreams, he always wanted something deeper, something grander. He longed for a regular or traditional life with his family, whom he loved deeply. Now, on the edge of adulthood, the whispers grew louder. They urged him to follow a path his family had walked for generations, a path of steel and sky. The Allen family had iron in their blood. Jeremy's father, uncles, and older siblings were all ironworkers. They balanced on skeletal beams high above the world, forging their lives in labor and bonding through the shared risk of the fall. Jeremy, the second youngest of 5, grew up on his father's stories about how he would proudly and confidently stride along narrow beams and high girders. Devout and tireless, his mother prayed daily for her husband and children. Jeremy's childhood was both transient and isolated. The family moved often, chasing construction projects across the South and Midwest. They lived in trailers and temporary housing, tied to steel and sweat. The other families who traveled with them became their only constants. They formed a tight-knit, nomadic community. But beneath the surface of camaraderie lay tension, as sharp and cold as the beams they worked on. Jeremy's father was a man of extremes. His love showed in his rough hands and a temper that ignited without warning. When anger boiled over, belts and fists spoke louder than words. Jeremy's mother endured it all in silence, her faith her only refuge. Then came the sickness. Cancer crept into their lives like a thief, stealing Jeremy's mother piece by piece. The summer of 1986 marked the end of their wandering. The Allens settled in Texas, not for work, but to witness her slow decline. Jeremy's father, who had faced death daily on the job, was powerless against this invisible enemy. His rage grew quieter but no less destructive, a storm brewing behind tired eyes. By the time Jeremy was 8, his family had fractured. His older half-siblings had left, unable to bear the weight of their father's anger. They had a mother of their own in Oregon and went to live with her. Their father was jailed for 18 months for another violent outburst. The house grew quieter, but the quiet brought no peace. Jeremy and his 6-year-old brother Stefan found themselves left to care for their mother alone. Their trailer became a cocoon of sickness and silence, the air heavy with unspoken fears. Jeremy's mother passed away shortly after his father's release. He would never forget the day she died. The heat was stifling. Adults whispered in hushed tones. Jeremy knew why they were all here, but he stayed silent. He felt the weight of responsibility as he held his younger brother's hand. Grief wrapped around him like a shroud, but Jeremy refused to cry. Stefan needed him to be strong, and strength, he believed, meant swallowing his tears. In the years that followed, Jeremy's grief turned to anger, and anger to rebellion. He became a storm of violence and defiance. His teenage years were a blur of fights, drugs, and music too loud to ignore. It clawed at the edges of his mind. Yet, amidst the chaos, Stefan remained his anchor, the one thing tethering him to the world. They shared an unspoken bond forged in the fires of shared trauma. But even Stefan couldn't keep Jeremy's darkness at bay. The house where their mother had died seemed alive, its walls steeped in sorrow. At night, Jeremy would wake to creaking floorboards. It was as if something moved just out of sight. He would investigate, flashlight in hand, but the halls were always empty. Yet, he felt it, an unseen presence lingering in the shadows. Stefan felt it too, though they rarely spoke of it. With so much pain in their lives, acknowledging the paranormal was an easy escape. By his mid-20s, Jeremy was drowning in drugs and alcohol. Substance abuse became his escape, a way to quiet the ghosts that haunted him. But the ghosts weren't just in his head. They were in the places he had lived, his fading childhood memories. The darkness followed him, a constant reminder of all he had lost. Jeremy decided to try creating art. He poured his pain into music and painting, channeling his anguish into creation. But even his art couldn't silence the echoes of the past. and he never really grasped the concept of music. Once a towering figure of rage and authority, his father softened with age. The man who had once seemed unbreakable was now fragile, burdened by guilt and regret. One night, alone in his living room, Jeremy's father succumbed to the weight of his memories, taking his own life. The news hit Jeremy like a hammer, reopening wounds he had thought long healed. Through it all, Jeremy kept moving forward. He often wondered what his mother would think of the man he had become. Would she be proud of his resilience, or would she see only the broken boy Jeremy saw in the mirror? He wanted to believe that she'd be proud and understand the battles he had fought to survive, but deep down, he had his doubts. At 30, Jeremy followed in his father's footsteps and joined a Red Iron crew. The job was a mix of danger and exhilaration, a constant dance with death. On his first day, he stood on a narrow steel beam high above the ground, the wind tugging at his clothes. The height was dizzying, and the sense of vulnerability was overwhelming, but he pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task at hand. Ironwork was his family's legacy, and he embraced the chance to honor it. For months, Jeremy worked tirelessly, proving himself to his co-workers. He learned to balance on beams as if he were born to it, his movements sure and steady. But the sense of foreboding never left him. The height, wind, and precariousness felt like walking a razor's edge. And then, one fateful day, that edge gave way. Jeremy was helping unload a cherry picker when his foot slipped on a wet bar joist. Time seemed to slow as he fell, the wind rushing past him in a deafening roar. Panic gripped him, and his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The impact, the pain, the end, and then nothing. When Jeremy opened his eyes, he was in an unfamiliar house. The walls glowed with a pale light. At first he thought he was dreaming, but as he wandered the halls, calling for help, he realized something was wrong. The family inside, a mother, father, and 2 children, seemed oblivious to his presence. He shouted, waved his arms, and even tried to touch the kitchen table, but his hand passed through it like smoke. This is not a dream, this is real. The truth hit him with the force of a grenade. Jeremy was dead. His life, filled with love, loss, anger, and regrets, had ended. The questions came in a torrent. How had this happened? Why? Where was he now, and what was he supposed to do? There were no answers, only the hollow ache of confusion and the gnawing dread of eternity. Jeremy drifted from house to house, searching for something he couldn't name. He haunted strangers, causing fear and unease without realizing it. Some nights he glimpsed other spirits. Their forms flickered like candle flames. They too seemed lost, trapped in a liminal space between life and death. Jeremy tried to talk to them. Their replies were like whispers lost to the wind. As the years passed, Jeremy's longing for his family grew unbearable. He searched tirelessly for his brother, Stefan, and his parents, whose love and pain had shaped him. He searched the houses, RV parks, and towns they had lived in and passed through, but his search was fruitless. The answers were always just out of reach. Jeremy's journey was one of isolation and yearning. It was a restless quest for connection through a world without seeing him. His spirit, bound by the weight of his past, could not move on. And so he wandered, a ghost in every sense of the word. Jeremy's story was far from over. He would search as long as he remained tethered to the pain and love of his mortal life, for his family, for answers, for peace. Jeremy's journey would go on, an endless echo in the void. The end.